Is Max Pacioretty a gamble? We'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help this show is to go over to YouTube, type in Locked On Capitals, and hit subscribe. In today's episode of Locked On Capitals, we talk about Matthew Phillips. Yes, I know a lot of people talked about a lot of the other movement that took place, the draft and Max Pacioretty, but there's another player that I think the Capitals got as a steal. We'll talk about that in the show. A little bit later, we will talk about the draft and ultimately, did the Capitals make the right moves? And then we will talk about Pacioretty as a gamble, and that is where we will start today. In today's episode, we have Jared from Washington Hockey Now. Jared, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dan. Glad to be here, as always.
I'm glad to have you here. So, when I was watching free agents here, in this case, I was listening to it. I was on a road trip. I was waiting for a big move. I'm like, Alex DeBrincat. No, that didn't happen. I was waiting for this other big move. There were no what I would call big moves. They signed Max Pacioretty, who at one point was a big player. 6 times in his career, he has scored 30 goals. But the last 2 seasons, he has dealt with Achilles issues. And some people said, well, why did they sign him? I'm like, well, the Capitals wouldn't have been able to afford him had he not had those Achilles injuries. They basically got him because he was, injury prone, suffices to say. What are your thoughts on Max Pacioretty? I was reading Washington Hockey Now, and I believe you referenced them as signing Pacioretty as a gamble. What are your thoughts?
It definitely is a gamble, but in the grand scheme of things, I think it is potentially the best approach that Brian McClellan could have taken with the deck that the hand that he was dealt. You got to remember, they didn't have much cap space to work with. The prospect pool, the draft certainly helped, deepen that, but they still don't have many prospects that they could deal for anybody of note. So yeah, I mean, Pacioretty seems like, considering the crop of free agents out there, it seemed like it made the most sense. And for the price they got him, I don't think it was a bad option for sure. Like you alluded to, he for the past 10 years or so, he's been one of the game's top goal scorers. It is a huge season, and you can't unload Anthony Mantha's contract. Like Brian McClellan had said, at the draft, there weren't many hockey trades being discussed. It was all about, oh, I'll give you this and you clear up some of this cap and you take some of this money on. So just understanding the landscape of it all, I think it makes the most sense for the Capitals this offseason. And I think it's a smart move.
Yeah, and they were looking for that goal scorer because it was Alex Ovechkin who scored, the most of the goals of the Capitals last season. The season before, Tom Wilson and Kuznetsov were the top 3 in goals. And we know that Wilson was injured for a good chunk of the season, and Kuznetsov had a down season, suffices to say. So I can see why they did it. The other, part of concern for me is that he's not going to be able to help the Capitals right away. I'm hearing that it might not be, worst case scenario until November. You can dig yourself quite a hole if you don't have a top player ostensibly until November. Is that worrisome as a Caps fan that he's not going to be available until November potentially?
I would say, yeah, to an extent, but at the same time, we always talk about, oh, Mantha and Kuznetsov, what are they going to do under a new coach? Obviously, Spencer Carbery's coming in, Laviolette's out, so I think there's a very real chance we could be pleasantly surprised come the first couple weeks of the season, and maybe Mantha or Kuznetsov flip a switch and do better. But ultimately, Pacioretty, when he is healthy, I think he will make an impact. Um, I wouldn't put the cart before the horse and say, the Capitals are screwed. I think let's all be patient here, and I think they've got a good foundation to at least be okay and be afloat for the first couple months of the season.
So then the other, somewhat major move I would say was Joel Edmondson, a blue liner. One of the things that we knew about the Capitals last season is that their blue line, suffered, a pretty great amount of injury. And I think that you can view as Edmondson as a depth piece, to a certain extent. And the key part of it is that the Habs are retaining 50% of his salary. So it was some bargain shopping for the Capitals. It does appear now, though, that Alexiev is most likely going to be the odd man out, the seventh defender. A little bit bummed about that. What are your thoughts on Edmondson, and where do you project him?
Well, I think the most important thing to note here is I look at Edmondson. Um, he is now that veteran left-handed blue liner. Alexiev, Fervari, uh, Sandin are all, I believe, 23. So, I think it was a smart move to go out and add someone like Edmondson who's got years of experience and can kind of, as he said, I asked him about it, and he sees himself taking on a sort of mentorship role. And I think that's really the main thing that McClellan and the Capitals were looking for with this move. Um, does it affect the depth chart? Yeah. I'm intrigued like you, I'm intrigued to see how that'll shake out. We'll probably have a better understanding as training camp goes on. And, obviously history is a concern, but they did just extend Alexiev. Sandin and Ferrari aren't going anywhere anytime soon. So you could look at it as potentially someone is the odd man out, but I would be shocked if, they didn't have some sort of rotation in place to where everybody's getting a good amount of games. Definitely. I think really this was just a deal to have that veteran presence in the locker room first and foremost.
And maybe some motivation for an Alexiev to kind of prove your worth, that kind of thing. I like what he brings to this team. He's, I want to say, 6'5", 200+ pounds, a rugged defenseman, I guess you could call him that, and has a little bit of snarl to his game. So I think there's a pretty good upside. Again, the salary retention, I think that Matt could have done much worse. That is safe to say. All right, so coming up straight ahead here, we will talk about the Capitals at the draft. They signed Leonard, they signed Chris Stahl. Were those the right moves? We'll talk about that straight ahead. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over/under to who you think is going to hit the first home run, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. It doesn't get any better than that. So there's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/locked on. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In today's episode, we have Jared from Washington Hockey Now, and you were actually at the draft, a pretty cool thing, I got to say. So what were your reactions to the Capitals signing Ryan Leonard? I know that a lot of people thought it was going to be Matvei Michkov. I believe we even talked about that on the show. But then I heard some strange things that he didn't, Michkov didn't even want to come to the Capitals. And I believe it was Sammy Silver that posted about it. And it seemed kind of odd to me because the Capitals appeared to me to be a Russian-friendly team. Maybe he didn't want to live under Ovechkin's shadow. I guess I don't know. What was your initial reaction to the Capitals selecting Ryan Leonard?
Yeah, so I guess first the main thing is you have to go back to Mishkov and think, obviously he's a heck of a talent. but it comes to a point where there's just so much smoke going around that um, it's almost kind of nice as somebody on the outside that Capitals didn't have to, put themselves in that situation. They can wash their hands of it all and move along. Now, with that being said, I think Leonard was a terrific pick. Um, a strong two-way forward. He's got a heck of a shot. Uh, unfortunately, I wasn't at development camp last week, but I saw a bunch of clips and I was really impressed with this kid. Uh, and especially, he's going to go up to, I believe, Boston College, still play with Will Smith and Gabe Perreault. He's going to continue to get better, and I think that all things considered, the Capitals got themselves a terrific prospect moving forward.
Yeah, some people are saying like a Tom Wilson 2.0, but then people are saying, well, no, he brings more to his game than that. An interesting thing, a video I saw from development camp is his shot was so hard that it broke a goalie's glove. So he's definitely not a guy to mess around with. But he didn't really point to Tom Wilson as a guy that he looked up to. I'm sure that he does, but he pointed to Tkachuk and Austin Matthews. Austin Matthews, who a couple of seasons ago scored 60 goals. So, I mean, if we can get even close to that kind of production out of him at some point, I think that would be a steal. The other steal, some people are saying, is Andrew Cristall. The fact that he was drafted in the second round is a bit interesting. Some people point to his size, that he's not the biggest guy. They point to his skating, which isn't the best. For you, do you view Cristall as a steal? And what is your assessment on why he went in the second round?
Oh, I think he's absolutely a steal. I think he is, once you get past that top tier of prospects in this draft, I think he was probably one of the more underrated offensive players. I would consider him to be one of the top offensive players in the draft, maybe one of the top 10 guys. Uh, the Capitals had a first round grade on him. And as I mentioned earlier, it was kind of hard to talk trades. Obviously, there were no trades in the first round. I believe it was Brian McClellan who said that they had maybe kicked the tires on trying to get back into the first round for Crystal. They were ecstatic that he was there at 40. I think ultimately the Capitals just got lucky. I don't think it's a knock on Crystal or anything. This was just a very deep draft class at the top. Um, and I guess at the end of the day, it's terrific for the Capitals that they still had a first round grade on a guy and they were able to get him at 40.
And some cool videos that I saw on WashingtonCapitals.com. He definitely has a great shot, a great passer. And let's not forget that Connor Bedard called him the smartest player he's played with, and that any team that gets him is going to be lucky. That's quite a ringing and endorsement, if I might say it myself. What were your thoughts on Connor Bedard's thoughts on him? I know that they're friends, but I don't think he's just going to throw around that praise to anyone.
Yeah, it's definitely high praise from Bedard, and Bedard knows him really well. Like you said, they were friends for a long time. They've been playing in a roller hockey league up in Vancouver, where they're all from. Uh, obviously it's a crapshoot in terms of they're all prospects, they're all 18, 19-year-old guys. Uh, but all signs point to, if he can continue his development, he's coming into a good system with the Capitals and the types of guys they have in that front office and on the coaching staff. All signs point to this guy being a very productive pro moving forward. So I think the Capitals definitely came away with quite the haul in the draft for sure.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything to be disappointed about. That is for sure. The other player, a defenseman, I know that, there was more than just another one, but this one kind of stood out to me as well, is Cam Allen, a blue liner that they selected. I think that he has a good upside. One of the things that they have spoke about is the Capitals want to address the blue line. And I know that he's not going to be ready for next season and potentially multiple seasons, but seems like a really solid pickup for the Caps. If we take a look at him, Allen's rookie season in the OHL Open Scouting Eyes has he put up 37 points, 13 goals, 24 assists in 65 games after entering the 22-23 season. Allen fell off the page a bit as he was only able to grab 25 points, 5 goals, 20 assists, and 62 in his sophomore game season there. So what are your assessments of him? It was a good thing, I think, that the Capitals selected a defenseman, is that it seems to be a position of need.
Yeah, he I was really impressed by him in more ways than one. First off, you got to remember I believe he was the OHL's Rookie of the Year that year when you said he put up 37 points. Strong two-way defenseman, offensive defenseman, whatever you want to call him. Some people thought for sure that he would have gotten higher than what was it, fifth round, fourth round, fifth round, around that point.
Fifth, yep.
So I think, definitely the potential is there on the ice. He was one of the guys that was at the draft that the Capitals picked up. And the thing that struck me about him is, he's 18, 19 years old. He, just by talking to him and understanding what he has to say and listening to him, this is a guy who gets it. He's smart. He's very intelligent. Uh, he's got the right he's mature beyond his years, I guess is the best way to put it. I was very impressed talking to him. And so he obviously had a regression last year. But I think he's got the right head on his shoulders to battle through that, understand what he did wrong, and understand where to go and where to build off of last season. So I think he was a terrific pick, and the value, what they got in the fifth round, I think is a tremendous pick, and really Ross Mahoney and that group deserves a lot of credit.
I agree as well. The other one that stands out to me, or one of the other ones, was Antoine Keller in the seventh round, a goalie. I'm always intrigued by Capitals goalies. Their pipeline is always stocked with grade A goalies. Never there's no stinker, shall we say, in there. They're always just really great goalies. And a player from France, the first player the Capitals have ever had from France. What were your thoughts on Keller? I know that he's might not even ever be a Capital, but the fact that he was willing to come over all the way from Europe, I think speaks volumes of him. And the interesting thing is that Ross Mahoney seemed pretty hyped about having him. So I don't think that he would have, some fake enthusiasm. What were your thoughts on him?
Yeah, at least at the draft, me and the other Capitals writers who were there, we were all set, packing up our stuff up, and here they go, trading up, getting back in the seventh round, and take Antoine Keller, who? But seriously, like, we couldn't find a whole lot about him, and obviously he wasn't there. But we talked to Ross Mahoney not too long after that, and of all the prospects that he had talked about, he was physically the most excited about Antoine Keller. So I think, even given Mahoney's track record of, he's had a lot of good draft picks in his time, to see him so excited about somebody who, is a bit of a project. But again, it really just goes back to that value. We were talking about Cam Allen, Antoine Keller in the seventh round. Ross Mahoney thinks that this could be, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but you get the vibe as if, this could be the Capitals goalie of the future one day. So, they really struck gold with value, I feel like. And I don't think there are many people who would disagree with that.
Yeah, it's just like I say, I'm always intrigued by the goalies that they pick. It seems like every year, they pick a goalie, sometimes a little bit higher, sometimes a little bit lower, but they always seem to have a good nose for picking just the right goalie. All right, so straight ahead, we will talk about Matthew Phillips. Who? Yeah, Matthew Phillips. We'll talk about him straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In today's episode, we have Jared from Washington Hockey Now, and I was listening to the Jeff Merrick podcast, and he was talking about Matthew Phillips and how the Capitals got a steal, and the Calgary Flames are going to be kicking themselves about that. And I'm like, wait a minute, who? I think I heard something about him, but I wasn't too familiar about him. The Caps signed Matthew Phillips to a one-year deal, one way, worth $775,000. Former Calgary Flame, like I talked about, listed as 5'8", 165 pounds. Phillips is a right shot centerman from Calgary. Phillips was selected in the sixth round of the 2016 NHL entry draft by the Flames overall, following an impressive showing in the Western Hockey League with the Victoria Royals. And what could he potentially mean for the Capitals? Phillips has been brought into the Capitals organization to provide depth in internal competition. This was a piece in the Hockey Writers here. What do you make of the signing of him? It seems like a solid move, and I'm going to revere Jeff Merrick and Elliot Friedman as guys that are really plugged into the NHL, just kind of at large, not a particular team. What do you know about Phillips? And it seems like just a steal, another steal that the Capitals got.
Yeah, and really just going back to, value, it seems like that is the big focal point of the offseason for the Capitals. 700 grand was the contract, I believe. Uh, yeah, he doesn't have much NHL experience, but he seemed to have at least. I'm looking at his stats right here just because I make sure I have them right. And 21-22 season with the Stockton Heat, he had 68 points in 65 games played. Uh, Plus, there's the familiarity with Mitch Love, his coach, and with Stockton and with the Calgary Wranglers coming in on the Capitals staff. Uh, it seems like a good fit. At the end of the day, you do need to go out and sign guys who fill out the roster. You can't go out and spend tons of money on these sexy free agents. Those will definitely get you far, but at the end of the day, it's the guys at the end of the bench, the guys in the bottom six that really push you over the edge. So I think it's definitely a good pickup. I think it seems like a pick that they definitely did their due diligence on, and they were smart about it. So I think he'll definitely fit in well.
And that's kind of historically, what the Capitals have done. I mean, I look back on Conley, several years ago, a guy that kind of came out of nowhere and really found his way with the Capitals, and they got him on the cheap. One of the things is he played so well with the Capitals, they couldn't, find a way to pay him to keep him around. So maybe it'll be another scenario similar to that where they got, found this diamond in the rough. Listen, Jared, I want to thank you once again for joining us on this edition of Locked On Capitals. I knew I wanted to talk to you because you were at the draft, and there's nothing like firsthand experience. So great that you're able to join us. Why don't you tell everyone where we can find your work?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at JaredSerre. That's my name, Jared Serre. Also on Threads now, since we're trying the whole Threads thing, same place at Jared Serre. And then you can read my stuff at WashingtonHockeyNow.com.
Always a wealth of knowledge on Washington hockey now. So thanks once again for joining us. And thank you all once again for joining us on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And are you a fan of other DC sports? Well, Locked On has got you covered. We got Locked On Nationals, Commanders, and Wizards. So no matter what major DC sport it is, Locked On has got you covered. All right, I'll talk to you guys again next time. Thanks for listening.